I want to take this opportunity to thank this host committee for allowing me to come up here and chair this meeting. It is truly an honor and a privilege. I love you all and I'm petrified. Just one thing before I introduce our speaker. This room has been divided into a smoking and smoke-free section. Please note the signs and in consideration of others, please keep your smoking to a minimum. Now I have the privilege and the honor of introducing the Florida speaker for this convention. And that's Jeff P. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Jeff since I've come into the fellowship. And I guess for those of us who know Ebenezer Scrooge, who controls the purse strings for this convention, is a real special man to me. Jeff is not afraid of speaking his convictions. Whether he feels that people will agree with him or not, he truly believes in the things that he says. And that takes a lot of guts, because I know for me, I people please, and I pretty much ride the fence when I have to, or when I can get away with it. And Jeff doesn't seem to be that way. Also, Jeff says a lot of the things when he shares that I know I had some questions about when I first came in, and sometimes still do. And one of the things that I am always fond of, Jeff shares about nobody ever taught him how to pray and what position your knees were supposed to be, and all those other things that we, or I, when I came into this fellowship and people told me what to do, they really never told me how to do it, and I had no clue. And Jeff always cleared those things up for me. And I'm going to let him come up here and make the same fool out of himself as I'm making him now. Please help me welcome Jeff.
My name's Jeff, and I'm an addict. So get it out of your system. It's okay. Before I start, hearing all the input on the readings, it's amazing that we can't get a Step in Tradition book written. Please send your input to the World Service Office. It is an honor to stand up here and to represent and be picked as a Florida speaker. I think for me it's more important than speaking at a world convention or speaking anywhere, because the Florida region to me means everything I've worked towards in Narcotics Anonymous service structure, and this is very important to me. I've been a trusted servant of the Florida region for, I'll have 8 years in August. So I was involved at 2 weeks clean, so ever since then. And it is important to me. If you're new and at a convention, I have the utmost in respect for you, because that's where I was at 3 weeks clean at a world convention with less people than are here now, and I know what I felt like. So if you're new, keep coming back. Use the feelings that you get out of this convention to help you stay clean another day. That's what we are here for. What I would like to do is share my experience, strength, and hope. What I share from a podium is my experience, my strength, and my hope. And like the obligatory thing to say is that it does not represent Narcotics Anonymous. I don't stand up here and say this is what Narcotics Anonymous says to do. It's only my experience and what I was taught. If you come out of here and find that nothing you hear can help you, that's quite all right. If you stick around, you'll find something that you need to hear. And if you hear something tonight and you can use it, that's fine. It'll probably change. I'm from Miami. My parents, like most people from Miami, were immigrants. They moved down from New York. What I can remember out of growing up and the period, so I like to break down my story between the period before I started using, the period that I used, and the period that I was clean. Each period of my life is real important. What it was like for me when I was using, or before I started using, is I was an abused child. The thing that I can remember from that is that, number one, you cannot tell anyone what's going on. So I learned at a very early age that no matter how I feel, no one's supposed to know it. I learned very early on that life was just the pits. That's what it was like for me. I was a very depressed child. I was listening, and we had a Frcna fundraiser the beginning of the month, and this one lady shared that what her biography was in her high school yearbook, most partyingest person. Mine, if it was in my high school yearbook, would be the person most likely to be at a party and no one even knew he was there. Because for me, I did not know how to talk to people, how to relate to people, how to share with people, how to do anything. Because of the things that happened to me in my childhood, I was very isolated within my head. I would not reach out to anyone. I would not talk to anyone. And the thing that I can remember most was I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I could hear my parents yelling at each other, and they were yelling about me. And I was sleeping in a bedroom with my brother, and my brother said to me, "Why don't you go in there and stop them because they're fighting about you?" And I remember being 5 years old and not knowing how to deal with that. It was like I was petrified, and I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't do anything. And at that point in my life, my reaction to that was I emotionally shut down. I became a person that no matter what happened around me, nothing affected me because I lost all emotion because I couldn't deal with them. I couldn't deal with the things that were going on. I mean, for the first probably 14 years of my life, I cried myself to sleep every night because I didn't know why these things were happening to me and what I ever did to deserve them. And then I found drugs. For me, using was an option. Using was good. I remember the first time I got high, I felt good for the first time in my entire life. And so I continued to do it. See, there's a thing about using drugs and being clean. There's a correlation between the two. Because when I used, people had to teach me how to use. I was not born with the instinct of how do you roll a joint. Okay, someone had to teach me, and I practiced. Okay, I got my little McDonald's tray, you know? And man, I would sit there and I would practice for hours. Okay, I was not very good at using either. I didn't know what I was doing. I remember the first time I used was on a bong, and it was like all the water came right up into my mouth. It was like, oh, you hold the hole. Okay, great. The first time that I used cocaine, I tried shoveling it into my nose. I didn't know you had to snort it in, okay? People had to teach me how to use, and I learned well. I cannot stand up here, though, and say I was a very successful addict. I was really probably a very lame addict. I think I'm the only person in Miami, the drug capital of the world, who never had a real connection. I mean, I was lame, okay? I mean, I was going through detox every week because it was how do I find drugs? Where do I go? I was so scared to go and get them, but I had to go do it. And it was when I got clean, I remember listening to the stories and the people sharing on their war stories and thinking why didn't I think of that? I'm scared to death that one day I'm going to use and I'm going to do it really good. That's one of the things that I might have learned in Narcotics Anonymous. So, there's nothing for me to share that was very eventful about I wish I had great stories, okay, funny, this is great, okay, but I didn't do any of that. The using that I did was alone by myself in my bedroom behind a locked door. That was it. When I can manage to find the drugs, I get them, okay, I go to my room, I do them until the next time I could find them again. And that's basically the story of my using. I used enough to get me to a point that I was at before I started using. It was only worse. Because, number one, I had an obsession and compulsion. Number two, I felt like shit still, and I was depressed again. And three, that one thing that had made me feel good didn't make me feel good anymore, and I thought all was lost. There was no hope for me. There was nothing that was ever going to make me feel good. And I didn't know what to do. It ended up that my last day using was spent on Miami Beach, contemplating, a romantic end to my life, swimming out into the sunset, ... Of course, it had to be romantic. I was had to really think about this, and of course, I was too scared to do it, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And the next night, I was going to the dog track, wound up at an NA meeting, and I've been clean ever since. It was not easy for me to get clean. Number one, when I got clean, I was 21 years old. God had not invented adolescent treatment yet. There was only a handful of people in the fellowship, at least around here, and probably the same for around the country, my own age. Even close. I mean, there was a handful of us. And it's good to see a lot of us are still clean today. But that made it real difficult for me to get and stay clean. Number one, because I couldn't relate, other than the use of drugs and the feelings that the use of drugs created, I couldn't relate to the people because of the age difference. They were in beginning to mid-30s, which is old, for me at the time. Oh, one amend's on the list. That and more, the thing that made it more difficult for me was because of my lack of any sort of social skills. It made it very difficult for me to share in a meeting, to go up to someone after a meeting, to talk to people in a meeting, to do any of the things that we like ask a newcomer to do in a meeting. It was, I remember I'd sit in a meeting being petrified of one thing, and that is someone would come up to me and say, "Hi, my name's Joe, and I'm an addict." And I'd say, "Well, hi, I'm Jeff." And I wouldn't know what to say after that. Until I got clean, I didn't know how to hold a simple conversation with another human being. That's how isolated I was in my addiction and before I got clean. So it was difficult having to get out of myself, having to share. And so I'm here to tell you, and it was amazing really speaking tonight. I really didn't get nervous about it, and I'm really not nervous now. You know, that I can stand up here in front of this many people in less than 8 years from coming where I came from. This is what Narcotics Anonymous has given to me. This is a new way of life and a new way to live. So I'm getting clean, and like the meetings that I went to, you go to a meeting and there's always certain people in a meeting that like everyone else is drawn to. They are the personalities. I got drawn to the personalities. And because I was drawn to these people, one other thing that happened to me, before I get into that, is something important happened at my first meeting. And that is, someone came up to me after the meeting, took me out to dinner with a bunch of people, took me home, got my phone number, and called me the next day to take me to a meeting. And that was very important to me because that really doesn't happen that much anymore. It's usually the other way around. It's like if you're new, you're the one who's expected to reach out and to do it. And I'm real glad that someone did it to me. I found out why this past year, and that's this guy was trying to hit on me. Okay? And I'm damn grateful I was too oblivious to everything to even notice. Because, I don't know how I would have reacted to that one. So I'm hanging around with these people, and the things that I got involved in is at 7 days clean, I was at an area service meeting. At 14 days clean, I was at a regional service meeting. And at 21 days clean, I was at the World Convention. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, of all places to have a convention. I'm thinking, maybe it's okay to drink beer. We're going to Milwaukee, you know? I remember being at that convention, I was scared to death. Because there was all these people, and I didn't know practically anyone. And like anyone, I spent the first 2 days of the convention in my closet. Third day, I stepped out of the closet. Fourth day, I came down and maybe talked to one or two people. And it was a major achievement because I went there and I was able to experience things. But it's because of these people that I was hanging with that I got involved in service in Narcotics Anonymous. And I think it's because I got involved in the service structure that I was able to deal with my inability to communicate with people. It's also the reason why there are a lot of people that seem to have a problem with me. It was because of, and they have all, they're right, okay? Believe me. Because I because I was involved in service and I didn't know how to communicate with people, what I did was I was trying to learn how. And like anyone learning, at first you do it very badly. And I communicated very badly. I was an arrogant, self-centered, self-righteous, egotistical son of a bitch. I was. Thanks. You clap. Yeah. And I got the nickname. We'll get into that. Everyone always asks me, well, how do you get this nickname? I haven't told it because it's really not that exciting either. It was at my first RSC meeting. I'm 2 weeks clean. And when I got clean, I'm like 6'2". I was 120 pounds. And we're in Key West. I had on like shorts. And like my legs, I had the boniest looking legs you ever seen. I still do even at 200 pounds. But at 120, they were bony legs. So these two guys gave me a nickname, Wilbur, having to do with Mr. Ed, because Mr. Ed's a horse and I looked like a horse. I had legs like a horse. Now, I don't know why my name's not Mr. Ed, but it's Wilbur. And all of that is better than the first nickname that they wanted me to be, and that was Seabiscuit. So even for that, I guess I should be grateful. So I'm getting clean. I'm getting involved in service. I've got a sponsor, which was very difficult for me to get a sponsor because, again, communication, going up to someone, asking, and stuff like that. I mean, I remember with getting a sponsor, my biggest fear was I was going to ask this guy to be my sponsor, and he'd ask me who I was because I was afraid he didn't know who I was. So, of course, what I did is, like, for a month, I, ran circles around him and make sure he knew who I was, so when I asked him, I wouldn't be embarrassed. And so I got a sponsor. Eventually also became a sponsor, which at the beginning was a joke. The first 16 people I sponsored went out and used. And it's like, that's a real process there, the first 4 people, it's like you're devastated. It's all my fault. 5 through 8 went out and used, and then you get like this snobbish spirituality. It's like God's will, But it's like 9 through 12, you start getting a little angry, and then by like 13 through 16, you're thinking like, I'm the kiss of death. Like, you want to stay clean, you find someone else. So I started sponsoring people. I had a sponsor, starting to work the steps. I was really a pain in the ass. A lot of times I like to say that I'm a recovering asshole more than anything else. Got onto my first step, and the first step for me was not a problem, because I knew my life was unmanageable, and I was powerless over drugs. That's the problem. I thought the first step said powerless over drugs. And I had to be reminded it's powerless over my addiction. But I knew my life was unmanageable. I mean, I knew that years before I ever got clean. But I never knew that there was another way. See, for me, it was if I stopped using, I'd be the same way I was before I started using, which was no better than it was then. So I needed to find something else. And the second step for me was a very important step in my life, because I had to come to believe in that something that could make my life better. That for me was what restored to sanity meant. Just to make me feel okay inside. I didn't want good, I didn't want great, I just wanted okay. And the second step was a real process. At the very beginning, it was the power greater than myself was my sponsor, because I know when I went to my sponsor, I asked him a question, he always seemed to have the answer for me that I needed. And that for me at the time was sanity. Just got the answers for me. I needed more after that, and so the meetings became the place, because in the meetings I started feeling a little comfortable. And that for me was was sanity. So that became a power greater than myself. And it evolved into a God of my understanding. My God. I don't rent him out. I don't lease nothing. He's mine. I had to learn a lot of things along the way. I thought Phil was going to tell my story before I got up here. For me, I was told by my sponsor to get on my knees and pray. Now, I guess for him it didn't seem any problem, but for me, I'm Jewish, and I never did that before. I was actually told not to do that you don't do that, and all of a sudden, like everyone else, good addict, mentally that I am, I became conveniently very religious. Never bothered me before, I never went anyway, but it's like, oh, I'm Jewish now. But eventually I did what he said, and I got on my knees to pray, and it's not easy because I'm real concerned of looking good while I'm doing this. And I don't know, you pray on one knee or you pray on two knees. Do you bend over, do you do this, you do that. I always thought my ass stuck out when I was praying, and that didn't look good. And there was no one for miles when I was getting on my knees. So that was a real big thing in my life at the time, major issue. But I did it. I was told by my sponsor, you should do that, and I did it. And I got to find that power greater than myself at the time, and it's changed throughout my recovery. I got to the third step and made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of that God. Before I could do that, for me, the type of person that I am, this one woman really got me pegged down, and I'm a very logical person. I needed to see it, feel it, touch it in order to believe in it. So for me, I went on a search for if there's a God, what would he look like? Because when I got on my knees to pray, I wanted to have this image in my head of what I was praying to. So I'm going around and nothing's happening. One day I found it. I was watching the Ten Commandments on TV. And if you remember the movie, and if you ever seen Charlton Heston when he's on the mountain coming down with the Ten Commandments, and if you have I was thinking, that's God. That's what he looks like. So when I get on my knees to pray, I'm praying to Charlton Heston. And that's the God I still believe in today. That's the image in my head of God as I understand him. And I made a decision. And that for me was about 90 days clean. And one thing happened in my life at the day I made the decision. And that is, I woke up in the morning and I went to sleep that night. And I woke up the next morning and realized the day before I had lost the obsession to use drugs. And for me, that was the most important thing. That at the time was the most important thing that there could be. Because I remember my attitude during the first 90 days clean was that I didn't know what I was doing in these rooms. See, I knew that I was not going to be able to stay clean. I knew that you might, and I believed in what you were telling me in the meetings, but I knew that I was not going to be able to stay clean. And that was my attitude. And I knew that my life was not going to get any better, no matter what you said. And that was my attitude. But that day, I lost the obsession to use, and my attitude changed. Because I knew for the first time in my entire life that there was hope. And I never had that before. and I knew that things could get better in my life, and I never had that before. And I knew that Narcotics Anonymous was a place that I should be in, and I never had that before. And this is real. It was real important to me, and it's still real important for me today, because I hope I never forget my last day using and my first day clean, because God knows I don't want to repeat either one of them again. And especially being involved in the service structure, one day it'd be nice if in whatever it is, a group meeting, an area service meeting, regional service meeting, or a World Service Conference meeting, that everyone in that room was thinking about their last day using and their first day clean. Because I know that if they were, that these things would be a lot smoother than they are. See, we all tend to forget, and we kind of like get so involved in the issues that we're dealing with that sometimes we forget what we're really here for. I know, because I should only speak for myself, because that's what I am like sometimes. Probably a majority of the times. And that's something I work on a daily basis, is remembering what I'm here for and what I need to do. So I got along and I went to the 4-step. I lied on my 4-step. I lied to my sponsor on the 5th step. You see, because there were things that had happened to me that I didn't want anyone to know about. And there are things that I did that I didn't want anyone to know about. Least of which is myself. I didn't want myself to even remember the things that I had done. That's why I was so scared I didn't even write them down. No one would see it. So it was like I was so afraid to face these things that I wouldn't even write them on a piece of paper, let alone share them. What the result of that was that months later, I repeated the exact same things that I was unwilling and afraid to write about. And I learned another lesson. And that is, it's a lot easier for me, at least, to rationalize some of the things that I did while I was using drugs, because I had an excuse. I was getting high. It's a lot harder to do that rationalization when I'm clean. I'm supposed to be a recovering addict, and here I am doing these things. What's my excuse? And so I try not to repeat a lot of the old mistakes. New ones, I even have a problem making new mistakes, but I at least can deal with them a lot better than repeating those same old mistakes. So I had to redo, and I did a 4-step and a 5th step. And I got to the 6th step. At that time in my life, I had 11 months clean. Some of the things that had been happening was that I got kicked out of school for failure to attend. That's a pattern in my life, even today. It was hard to rationalize that one, too. I never got kicked out of school all the time I was using, but here I am clean, and now I'm getting kicked out of school. Couldn't figure that one out. Because of that, my father kicked me out of the house, and he said, well, he had made a deal with me years ago that if I'm in school, he'll support me, and if I'm out of school, I can support myself. So I was out of school. It was time for me to support myself, which I had never done before. And so I moved to Miami Beach, not that far from here. In this dive, I was in this studio apartment, like roaches. It was depressing. And here I was looking around at things in my life at that time in my recovery, and I'm saying, when I was using, I lived in a nicer place. I had more money. I had a nicer car. All these material things were a lot better for me when I was using. But I realized while I said it that there was one difference, and that is the feelings that I had inside were different. and that those feelings that I had inside were more important than those material things. And so I place a lot more emphasis on what's going on inside of me than what's going on outside of me. So I went back and had to learn about a little humility, and I went back to my father, who said, okay, I said, I want to go back in school, and he said he'll support me, but I'm going to have to do it his way. And so I said, I had to think about it first, and I said, he didn't tell me what his way was going to be, and I said, okay. And he said, what I want you to do, we'll send you up to school, you're going to go to Boca Raton, live with your grandmother in Century Village. Now, if you're out of state or you don't know about this or you've been in a hole or something, Century Village is like not the hot spot of activity in the state of Florida. Okay, it's like the average age is dead. But I had to get very humble and I made that decision and I did it. I also moved to an area at that time which was, how do I describe this? The NA message was not very clear. Isn't that special? I think that was very nice the way I described that. And I had not been used to that. I mean, the people that I had been had hung around with we were like NA Nazis, NA terrorists. I mean, it was like we were animals. and I was there, and I had to learn a lot of things about doing what I can do to change things, but then also doing a lot of things to accept things. And that there's only so much that I can do, but I did what I could do. And I thank God that there were other people, one of whom had moved down from Ohio, that was real instrumental in doing that. And I remember that. And we hung out together, and we formed this little club of NA Nazis. And we would get them as they came in the door. We'd take them out and orient them and this is the NA message. All you have to do is go to Narcotics Anonymous, and that things are going to be okay. Hang out with us. We go all over the country every weekend. It's you're going to have a great time. We made things real attractive, and we made the NA message fun, which is one of the things that I'm real grateful for when I got clean. And those people who were involved in the Florida region and in the state of Florida, we were it was a party. When we went out to a convention, people knew who we were. I mean, there was a phrase coined, work the steps or die, motherfucker. And everywhere we went, we screamed it, we yelled it, and we were rowdy, obnoxious, but we were alive, okay? And you knew that there was something there, that NA meant something to us, and it was real important. I mean, I remember I went a lot of things is my best friend, he calls me one night and it's oh, how'd you like to drive to Ohio for a convention? First Frcna. It's oh, sure, you know. So we drove up there, and there were 4 of us there from the state of Florida. And people knew who we were. We were in a banquet, and it's all they heard was 4 people can make so much noise. You couldn't believe it. I guess that's where we got into a war with that other fellowship, the Ohio region. And with a lot of other regions. The Georgia region don't like us too much either at times. I mean, we were at a banquet once, and they're doing this banquet stuff, and we all stand up and walk out, right in the middle of the thing, like we were an armed terrorist, we were a drill unit, and it was really something. We were crazy. So I got on my 6th and 7th step, and I got a lot of defects of character. I 6 and 7 are different steps, but for me it was a process. So I'll describe the process, which for me took 3 years to do the 6th and 7th step. I stayed on that step for 3 years. And I had to learn about my defect. I had to learn that that defect didn't make me feel good, but it caused me great harm and others great harm. And then I had to be willing to have it removed. See, my big problem with the 6th step was that there were defects I thought they really did make me feel good. I thought my ego was good. I thought my lust was good. I mean, I liked it. I didn't see anything wrong with it. I thought that it made me the person that I was, and it did. That was the whole thing. It made me the person that I was, and I needed to find a new way to live, as they say. Trying to tie this into the theme as we go along. And so I dealt with those defects. And I humbly asked God to remove my shortcoming. Doesn't mean my defects have been removed. My shortcomings can be removed at any period of time that I choose to humbly ask God to do it. I still have my defects, though. The choice to act out on them is mine. Some days I do, some days I don't, and that's the way it goes. I got to my 8th step, made a list. For me, I'm glad I got clean when I was 21, because it wasn't that long. I'm grateful that I didn't hang out and hurt that many people, and I was isolated because it just wasn't that long, and I had to make my amends. And I had to learn that when I make my amends, I do it humbly. And that when I go to a 10th step, I have to be humbly admitting that when I'm wrong. And I've done that because I've been wrong a lot. Today, and people know because I've done it, and they know, if I'm wrong, I try to promptly admit it humbly. I don't say I'm sorry, because that's, for an addict, is a meaningless phrase. But I apologize and at the same time make a commitment to myself to say, I'm going to try not to do it again to someone else. And that for me is a spiritual value of the 10th step. And I get to 11th step. And prayer and meditation for me is the hardest thing for me to do. For me to quiet this mind is difficult. For me, I meditate in the shower. Feel the water run on my back, and that's the best way I can get to meditate and to ask God what His will is for me and how can I do that. And then I get to the 12th step, and I carry the message to the addict that still suffers. And that I've tried to do throughout my recovery. A lot of times I try to do that 12th step without the benefit of working the first 11. And I found out that that's a problem. But all in all, I'm able to stand up here tonight and say that my life is beyond my wildest dreams. And that there are things that are going on in my life today that I never thought were possible. I got, number one, I never thought I could have a relationship. And what happened and the way this worked was that I had an obsession over this one girl. I was about a year and a half clean, and I said, I want to go out with you, do some more than that. And she said, no, I want to be your friend. I was depressed. And I'm looking around and seeing, looking at the people in my life, and they're I know all these women, and they're all my friends. I said, I don't want no women friends. I want to get laid, And I was obsessed. I kept asking her and hanging out with her and hanging around her and hoping, and I prayed for it. And my God, is a funny God. When I ask God for something, he has various responses. He can say yes, he can say no, he can say wait. He can also say, you must be kidding. And I asked God for this, and he said, you must be kidding. Don't waste my time. And the obsession continued, and I was getting to the point where I wanted to go out and use. And I thank God that there was someone there who's my best friend, and he sat me down outside of a movie theater, and he said to me, he knew what was going on, and explained to me that maybe what I should do is ask God for what his will is for me. And not just that, but to believe that whatever his will is for me is going to make me truly happy, that I couldn't do for myself. And so probably for the first time, at that point, and I did that, that's probably those very few times where you're like really spiritual, because it's like you're asking for nothing in return but what, God, I want what you want for me. And I meant it with everything that was in my body. And the obsession was removed. And a week later, I met a woman who today is my wife. Now, this is not to say that every time you do this, yeah, I know you little dope fiends in this room are just like, I hear them minds working. And for me, being in this relationship, probably the only relationship I've ever had in my life. And for me, it was a real journey, like everything else, and a real process, like everything else in my recovery. In that I wanted to do this romantically. I read all the books. I'm a romantic really at heart. We went out and we went steady. And we moved things along the way I always wanted it to be. And it was a real process, and I grew to love her and was able to share things with her, and she's a friend of mine. And the relationship is a very important part in my life today. Today, I'm a father, which is ridiculous. I never could see myself being a father. I was always scared that when I became a father, I would repeat the mistakes of my parents. And I haven't had to do that as a result of the 12 steps and just the spiritual principles that I feel and I live by. And my family is a very important part of my life today. And I never thought that this was possible. I never thought I would get to this point. I never thought that I would like it if I had it. I'm realizing my worst nightmare that I had, and that was that one day I grow up and be just like my father. And it's happening. It's like I work all the time. I got a full-time job, and I go home, hug the wife, hug the baby, We're like the Cleavers. It's like Beav, isn't it? And that's a very important part of my life today. The other important part of my life today is Narcotics Anonymous and service to Narcotics Anonymous and the Florida region of Narcotics Anonymous. Because, as I said, I've been a trusted servant there. I went to my first one at 3 weeks clean. The next RC, 2 months later, I became a subcommittee chair. And I've been a trusted servant in that region for all that time, except for a 2-month period, in which I said at the end of, I was chairing the region at the time, and said, this is my last meeting, I'm now going to be making babies, not motions. I found out, and what actually happened is our baby was conceived during that RSC weekend. I mean, I got engaged coming home from an RSC. The service and the Florida region has been a very important part of my recovery. And the people and the friendships and the relationships are my most valued relationships that I have today. Because I have come to grow real close to the people who are involved in this region. And I won't be doing it much longer because of the fact that, I don't know why it is. I'm 29 years old and I feel like I'm over the hill. There's really no place left for me to go in the Florida region. And so I don't think it will be that much longer. And I'll miss that. And I'll miss the people and I'll miss the relationships. And I'll miss going around the state. I'll miss the fun that we have and the caring that we do have. But it's time for me to move on eventually. Like, get a life. Become what it talks about in our literature, an acceptable, responsible, and productive member of this society. The one that I live in, the one that I'm a part of, and I am a part of that society today. So it's real important for me to do that. And I'm going to miss it. I just want to, while you were here, I'm going to miss you when it happens. I'm like, a little projection, okay, never mind. It's funny, I talked to my sponsor about speaking here, and he gave me one suggestion, or one piece of, advice, and that is, don't piss in your pants. Well, I'm still dry. And I'm real grateful for being a part of Narcotics Anonymous. The one thing I miss out of being in service that we don't get to hear so much that I want to do tonight is there's usually not a lot of thanks being in service. You usually get a lot of shit. And I'm not talking about the glamorous service. This, for me, this is glamorous service. This is not like the tooth and nails service. It's like you're a group secretary. Thanks for being involved and thanks for being in service. If you're like a treasurer of your group, you're making coffee, thanks for being involved and making a difference. If you're involved in area service, as a GSR subcommittee chair, a part of a subcommittee, the PI secretary that never gets any thanks, thanks for being in service. And thanks for making a difference. And if you're in regional service and doing all the regional things, and you're subcommittee chair, you're an ASR, you're secretary of the H&I committee. H&I usually try to exclude because they always get a lot of clamor for themselves. Have these H&I lunatics, and they're always... But if you're involved in H&I, and I was reading the newsline, there are 45% of all people hear about the Narcotics Anonymous Fellowship come from a hospital or an institution. So if you're doing that H&I meeting, and if you're carrying that message to an institution, thanks for being in service. And thanks for making a difference. Because without the people who are involved, without the people who go to the meetings, who share in a meeting, without the people who set up the meeting, without the people who are on the committees, without all these people, I probably wouldn't be clean today because I would have had no place to go. So thanks for being in service. I would like to thank the program committee for making me their second selection. I was not the first choice even. That's okay. It's humility. I would like to thank the program committee for helping me achieve one of those things that I've always wanted to do. And the one thing that was really important to me, whether I got it or not, that was up to someone else. But it was important to me, and I always wanted to do it. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share. And if you're new and you're here for your first convention, and if you don't know if it's going to get any better, if you don't think the obsession to use will ever be lifted, if you don't think your life's ever going to get any better, keep coming back.